Hey, this is John Lee Dumas of the award-winning podcast Entrepreneurs on Fire, and you're listening to the Excelsior Journeys with George Sirois. Prepare to ignite.
Is there a burning desire within to share your creativity with the rest of the world? Do you insist on pursuing your passion by any means necessary? Then you are on an Excelsior journey, and you are not alone. Welcome back to Excelsior Journeys. My name is George Sirois. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for being a subscriber to the Podbean channel or to any other place where you listen to your favorite podcasts. And thank you so much for giving me your likes, your comments, your suggestions. All of that is so much appreciated. And I look forward to hopefully meeting a lot of you in the St. Louis area on Saturday, April 27th, when my fellow Aloris Publishing author Rebecca Jaycox and I will be at Barnes & Noble at West County Center. We will be there at 11 a.m. to 2 p.m., and we will be signing copies of both our parts 1 and 2 of our trilogies. I obviously have Excelsior and Ever Upward, part 2 of the Excelsior Journey, and Rebecca has The Other Inheritance and her sequel, The Other Queen. And the fun part is both of us are hard at work at our part 3s. She is working on The Other War. I am working on Greater Glory, part 3 of the Excelsior Journey. So we got a whole lot going on. And speaking of a whole lot going on, on May 4th, there is going to be a really fun gathering to celebrate the launch of the next stage of this podcast. When I first started this, it was part of the Right Pack Radio Podcasting Network. As life tends to do, life tends to change, and it is now part of the Winding Trails Media Podcasting Network. And that URL is going to reflect that very shortly. And in preparation for our big launch on Sunday, May 5th. A big reason why I am so excited for this particular episode is because on this first week of April, with just a few weeks to go before we finally get to full-on explode the Winding Trails Media Podcasting Network, I say we because my guest for this week is a big reason why a lot of things are happening for me. He is someone I strongly consider a very good friend, and I'm thrilled to say that I am now a partner with him on the Winding Trails Media Podcasting Network. In case you don't know about St. Louis, it has a wonderful writing community, and that's actually the same that goes for the entire state of Missouri. I didn't know this when I came here in 2011, and it was when Excelsior got accepted by Rocking Horse Publishing for its second edition. That's when I knew just how wonderful a community of writers is in the St. Louis area and Missouri in general. And everyone here, they always support each other. They always motivate each other. They always bounce ideas off of each other. And in the case of Right Pack Radio, they podcast with each other. And that was the case several years ago when David Lucas and his partner, Kathleen Kayembe, put together a weekly roundtable discussion called Right Pack Radio. And in 2016, I was invited to join Right Pack Radio as a full-on member of the Right Pack. And it was something that I was very, very proud of and still am to this day. And it was because of that community being so welcome for me, that's what gave me the confidence that I could actually pull off a podcast on my own. And that led to joining up with David and at first being part of the Right Pack Radio Podcasting Network, but it is now the Winding Trails Media Podcasting Network. And we have so many plans for this. I can't wait to share all of this with you. But for this particular episode, we're going to talk to the man himself. He is not only an author and a podcast producer himself, but he is also the esteemed president of the St. Louis Writers Guild. And we're also going to talk about how long he has been the president of the St. Louis Writers Guild, because as long as I've known him, he has at least been an officer at the Guild, and much longer than that, he's been president. So I'm looking forward to chatting, to getting to know David on that level. I'm looking forward to introducing you to all of that. So without further ado, let me introduce you to my guest this week, David Allen Lucas. David, how are you, sir?
I'm doing good, and thank you for that introduction. I'm feeling a little bit even more humble than normal. That's a lot.
That's what I've been told. A lot of people tend to enjoy my introductions, while others may say it's a little bit long. But at the same time, this is my opportunity to introduce so many great people to the world. And yeah, I'm going to talk them up a little bit before I hand them the mic. So that's kind of the way I roll.
I appreciate it.
So yes, we are just about a month away from launching the Winding Trails Media Podcasting Network. And if you are already a subscriber to Excelsior Journeys, and I really hope you are, that means that you are going to have access to Winding Trails Media Podcasting Network 7 days a week. You're going to have once the network is fully booked up. Right. And we are, in the process of, taking pitches from other potential podcasting hosts who have an idea that will match what the mission statement for Winding Trails Media is. So with that in mind, David, tell our listeners, what exactly is the mission statement for Winding Trails Media?
It is to explode the human potential.
Yep. You heard it. You heard it right here, folks. What we are talking about is everything that, if you are inspired to pursue something, you have a home here. And that's really what this is all about. If there's something that is driving you, that wants you, that is basically pushing you to succeed creatively, then this is where you want to be. This is where you want to listen. This is where you want to download. This is where you want to subscribe. And in some cases, this is where you want to host your own podcast. So we are looking forward to hearing from all of you. And David, let me go ahead and just I feel like I've already done quite a bit of talking so far. So let's go back to the beginning for you as a creator, as a content creator, as an author, as someone who truly loves writers the way that you do, which you obviously do, considering everything you've done for the St. Louis Writers Guild. So let's start at the very beginning. What was your lightning strike moment that made you point to the writing community and say, I want to be a part of that?
Wow, that is I think probably for a lot of writers out there, as other creatives, it's a chicken and egg question. Where did it all start? And oddly, I would say the germ of the egg itself started in third grade, but actually hid in seventh grade. I wrote a completely horrible short story based on Dracula back in third grade. It was a Halloween thing. And I still remember writing it. I couldn't tell you the whole story about it. And then in seventh grade, I wrote my first novel by hand. And believe me, you can imagine a seventh grader style. Yeah, trust me, it's burned. It will never see the light of day.
I know exactly what you mean. I did the same thing when I was in ninth grade. I wrote my first one by hand, and it was basically, as I've said before, it's reverse fan fiction. I was ripping off every storyline under the sun.
Yeah, I hear it. Well, the first novel I wrote was a fantasy, and Mr. Seventh Grade version of me thought it was really funny. It was humorous to name my knight in the story Circumference.
Oh boy!
Yes, math joke. Sorry, people. But I really, at first, writing was a outlet for me. It was therapy in a lot of ways. I'm sure that's also the same with a lot of writers. I'll go ahead and share it. Let me jump well in advance. We've talked about Winding Trails Media, podcast network. I've got a new podcast that's going to start in May after our launch, and it's all about exploring the human potential. All about exploring ourselves, our world, and our universe. And a lot of that comes from the pain that was from back then. Sorry, wow, here I go getting choked up on you. Sorry about that. Point
That's
blank,
right. That's right.
in elementary school, I was encouraged to drop out.
Really?
Yeah. Oh, and in middle school, encouraged to drop out.
Oof.
High school, I was encouraged to drop out. And by the way, this was not by my parents. My parents fought. It was by teachers and some administrators. And when you tell it to your face, it's a good idea to drop out, David. No. And what that stemmed from was from some learning disabilities I had. And hilariously, I do mean that hilariously, the learning disabilities is recognized in the state of Missouri, where we're at, is in writing and spelling. Of course, which are two things we rely on in our work. But of course, writing part of it was not being able to sit down and type. It was handwriting.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they thought back then that level, if you were learning disabled, that meant you were, excuse me, I don't know if this is still the correct term. I'm using old term, mentally retarded, or just this shy of it, which is not true. Learning disabled usually have a higher than average level of intelligence. In high school, I forced them to retest me. I'm not going to talk about all the test scores, but give you an idea. The teachers didn't believe it, by the way. They didn't believe a test. They had me take it 4 times. As a 9th grade kid, I had a understanding of mathematics, general science, history, was somewhere around junior level college. My reading comprehension was doctoral level. My spelling and my handwriting, I'm not sure which one was which, but one was 4th grade, one was 6th grade. That shocked the heck out of a lot of teachers, and this whole entire talk about dropping out of school ended with that. And I'm here to tell you I've got a master's degree.
There you go.
You go. And the writing during that time period, it was childish writing. I admit it. I know it was. But that's what got me started on the road.
Mm-hmm.
But it wouldn't be until 2008 when I finally learned about the writing community here in St. Louis. And I learned about it by accident. I was a coworker of mine whose son had actually joined St. Louis Writers Guild. I don't know when, but he had then left and he had changed states and all that. But she had told me about him. And I first went to my first meeting in 2008, fell in love with the group right away. And in the same year, probably not even 3 months later, I became the chairman for membership, which eventually became a board position. Mm-hmm. So I went up to vice president of membership. And then I've been president of St. Louis Writers Guild since 2015.
I knew it was, I wasn't sure whether it was 2014, 2015, 2016. Yeah. I know it's been a couple of years already, since you've been president. And I can say, now granted, the meetings that I've been to, I've been to events, since, before you were St. Louis Writers Guild president, but the monthly workshops, and Writers in the Park, all those things I experienced after you became president, during your time there. And I got to say, if you have ever really seriously thought about being a writer, you need to come to these monthly workshops. They will do nothing but inspire you. They will motivate you. Whatever wall is in front of you in terms of a writer's block, it will put a wrecking ball to it. And I strongly recommend you guys come out and be a part of that.
And if you're not in St. Louis, by the way, St. Louis Writers Guild, don't let the name sound like it limits you. We have members who are international. And a lot of our workshops, if you're a member, I have to emphasize that because we don't share this out to the general public, but we record a lot of the workshops and we keep those 2 or 3 at a time. They do come down, but they're kept in the member room, which is password protected. But if you're a member, you've got the password. You're able to go in there and you're able to at least listen to the workshops and get the same information.
There you go. Yeah. I mean, that is, I mean, that is such a great resource to have, because you do get to in some way participate even when you're not really there.
Hmm.
But at the same time, just as with anything, it does really benefit you if you are, like in the St. Louis area. And it definitely benefits you to be there, because then you get to add the networking element along to it. And that's something that's, obviously you can do that virtually, on, throughout social media. You can go ahead and reach out to the different speakers. You can go ahead and reach out to the different board members. But there really is something about, being able to shake hands with another author, just to remind you that you're not alone in all of this.
Or even another person who's struggling to break through and has no idea where to go.
Yeah.
Is a great chance to do there. And I'll tell you, George, you've heard me talk about the nightmares that other writers have seen, and I can almost picture myself going down that road. The ones that fall into the vanity press trap.
Yes.
And they sometimes these vanity presses don't call themselves vanity presses. That'd be too easy. That's like putting a little red hourglass on the back of a spider on that. So they avoid it. But vanity presses want you to pay for your work to get published, and they do nothing for you. And there's so many people. There was one teenager, I'm not going to mention her name, love her to death, and she had already had a work published in the vanity press, one that was well known and the owners went to prison for. But at the time in which she approached St. Louis Writers Guild, she joined us and found out what had happened to her. She was in the middle of a lawsuit to get her rights back for, at least 7 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's a scary road to go down, and I'm going to be honest, if I could, which I'm always honest, but to be honest, use that term, if I had a nickel for every author or every potential author that I've run into that's gone down that road or started to go down that road, I might be able to buy a house in Beverly Hills, California.
Yeah, I can believe it. We both have this experience. You're currently president of the St. Louis Writers Guild. You've been it for a few years. I, am happy to have had a term as president of the Missouri Writers Guild. So yeah, I definitely understand that, and something that it's definitely something that you it's a notch in your cap if you can help another author avoid those kinds of traps. And when you're in the kind of position that that you are now and that I have been, it's a great feeling to have done that. It shows that you're doing your job.
Yep.
As the president of this guild. And so so tell us about like that first time that you attended a meeting. Like what was it, what was that sort of feeling like when you got to actually experience being around other authors like that?
Well, in a word, it was amazing. I'm not sure if this was the first one, or it definitely was in the first 5. We had an agent that came in to talk to us.
Mm-hmm.
This agent, Grayson is the last name. I can't think of his first name to save my life right now. But anyway, he had a handout for us. And within 2 hours' time, he had taught me more about how to write a story, a fictional story, in 2 hours' time than any of my creative writing classes in high school or college ever talked on.
Wow.
And I sat back going, oh my God, first off, no wonder I'm not published. This is back then. I had written a couple of historical mysteries, short stories, which is not my main focus. And they got rejected. And actually, one got rejected after about 5-6 months sitting out there, and the second one got rejected in the week. I got the rejection notice the next day after the first rejection notice. So,
wow.
Yeah, it's like, okay, I got the hint on that one.
Yeah.
But I had written a sci-fi, which that one I look back at going, yeah, that's also not going to see the light of day, but I could go through and I took their chart, if you will. It was a diagram of how things should move, and I was like, oh my God, this is what I'm doing wrong.
Yeah.
And applying that diagram to a later story is what got me published.
So you were able to basically just kind of take everything that he taught you and immediately put into action.
Exactly.
That's something that I know that like I've been guilty myself of being able to, of taking a lot of notes and getting really excited and everything, but then falling back into old habits on my very next thing. So, that's great that you were able to take that and apply it right away. That's great that you were able to do that. So what happened, so as you, came aboard, like with the board of the St. Louis, you started working with them. And what happened? What was that moment like when they decided they were going to turn to you and just say, you're running the show now?
Actually, I had two of those moments. I had to turn them down the first time.
Really?
A job I was working at the time, well, I'm not going to go on air with it, but let's just say the hours were horrible.
Yeah.
George, you and I have talked about that before.
Oh, yes.
Off the mic.
Oh, yeah.
And let's just, I'm just going to say this. The only guaranteed holidays out of the year I had was Martin Luther King Day. The next one was Thanksgiving.
Oof.
The only guaranteed weekends I had were about this, into October.
Yeah.
During that time period. So October through January, through up to Martin Luther King Day were guaranteed weekends. The rest were, you were lucky. Anyway, so I turned them down at first, and they went to another person, and which is somebody who I recommended and who I was rooting for. That was Brad Cook. He did a fantastic job for 3 years as president. He still works in the background. He's still on the board. He still works on the background doing Herculaneum tasks.
Yes, he is. Big shout out to Brad R. Cook, by the way.
Amen. And you can find his books out there too. I'm going to go ahead and shout that out. He was a member of Right Pack Radio as well. I helped him as part of the board, and he and I worked in partnership a lot. And then he came to me, and I was like, okay, fine, I will take it, because he was burnt out on being president. Mm-hmm. Which leading any nonprofit organization, any volunteer organization, and you're not getting paid, can wear you out.
Yes, I
knew that I was once a scoutmaster for Boy Scouts for several years. And I knew what that was like, and I handed it off to a good leader, and it was you do the same thing here.
Right.
And St. Louis Writers Guild grew to its largest, I think, under Brad, and we've basically maintained underneath that because we got hit with the recession. Mm-hmm. So we kind of grew back up to where we were, and then we've plateaued. But we've got somewhere around 200 to 300 active members during that time.
And when you say active, like this is, like you mean very active, because I see a lot of people that are involved in the guild that are very, very enthusiastic, that are showing up, that are filling every seat at the DePere Lodge.
Yeah.
For the workshops.
Yeah. In fact, we recently moved. Well, I say recently, it's been now 2 years, 3 years, 2 years at Lodge DePere. That we've been there. Before that, we were at the community center in Kirkwood. We were averaging at the Kirkwood Community Center 20 to 30 people at any given workshop. Since we moved to Lodge DePere, that blew up to an average of 50 to 60 people per workshop.
I always have to find a seat. It's rough to find a seat. Like when you're showing up late to one of those. So
it is.
Make sure you show up early. Because not only do you get a seat, but you also get an extra chance to network with everyone who's there. And you don't want to turn that down.
And I know we're probably going to get to this, but I'm going to go ahead and throw it out there anyway. One of the things that St. Louis Writers Guild does that anybody can come to is Gateway Con. The Gateway to Publishing Conference and Convention. It got started. We're now coming up on our third conference.
Yep.
It's actually really 3 conferences in one. You have a writers' conference with agents and publishers to pitch to, people, both the big bigger name professionals coming in to give workshops, but we also have enlisted help from the other writing communities in St. Louis, like St. Louis Publishers Association, the Missouri Romance Writers of America, the St. Louis chapter of the Sisters in Crime. We also had, last year was the Midwest Mystery Writers of America. We're not sure they're on board this year, but if they want to be, they still are more than welcome. But all these people are showing off their skills. And we also had the St. Louis Journalist Association. I probably have their names wrong, and they're going, if they ever get their hands on this podcast, I'm sure they'll write me up in the newspaper yelling at me. But I love you guys. Just it's not in front of me.
The St. Louis Press Club.
Thank you. Yep. Yes, the St. Louis Press Club. Yep. Oh, I'm sorry. It's been a long day. Anyway, St. Louis Press Club. They were involved as well, and we brought in some documentary films. In the writers portion, we talk about all different kinds of writing, and it's open to everybody, as far as if you're a newbie writer up to the one who's trying to get published and get your first one out there, to those who've been out there and they want to pitch a new work to a different agent. That's all for you guys. It's open. And we are, as George has said, everybody's a family. But if you're not a family member before you're there, you're pretty much going to be by the time you leave. Then we have a writer's retreat. And with that, this free programming, all you have to do is stay in the hotel for 2 nights that we have it at. And it's just a bunch of write-ins, free activities. You do get perks. And then on top of that, one of the biggest arguments we've had with other dissatisfactions we've had with other conferences that all of us have gone to, is there's no place really to sell your book. And if there is, when there is something, it's limited. You don't have a general public coming in. So we have a free book fair on top of that. So you don't have to be physically part in the conference. You can get a table and sell your book to the general public. And we try to get the general public there, and we ask the authors to keep tweeting and social media announcements, hey, I'm going to be there, but to get the people in. But it's a free book fair to everybody who can come in. Mm-hmm. Then I said we had 3 conferences. I lied. We have 4 conferences tied into one. Because last year was the first chance we had to do this. We've wanted to do it, and now this year is our second time doing it, and that is having a young writers conference in the book fair area that's free for the kids to come to, obviously the parents as well, and as a chance for kids to break into writing and to learn, to sit down with an author and to know what it is, how to really write. And I don't want to throw teachers on the bus when I say that. Academic writing is one thing. Fiction, or the pulps, if you will, I've learned is a different kind of writing, a different industry. Yeah. And school is great. They need to get all the basics of school in there. Mm-hmm. But there's a school platform, and they have to, excuse the term, base jump to the other one with all those skills in their backpack. Mm-hmm. And this is that other base they can jump to.
Right.
To help them learn.
I do have to say that the idea of putting the young authors section of Gateway Con in the dealer's room where a lot of different authors have their tables set up, where they have their books set up and everything to sell. That is an inspired idea, because that created such a wonderful buzz throughout the whole area. Everyone was just charged up just by by having all this access to all these young readers, and for the young readers and young authors to have access to all of the authors sitting at their tables.
Yes.
That was a tremendous, tremendous idea, and it did nothing but a positive thing overall for the whole conference. It gave it like an extra oomph that made everyone really excited to be there.
Today's show is brought to you by Audible. Audible is offering our listeners a free audiobook with a 30-day trial membership. If you've never been an Audible customer and want to see what they offer, just go to www.audibletrial.com/Excelsior Journeys and browse the unmatched selection of audio programs. Download a title for free and start listening. It's that easy. Why Audible? Audible content includes an unmatched selection of audiobooks, original audio shows, news, comedy, and more from the leading audiobook publishers, broadcasters, and entertainers. And with this free 30-day trial, you'll have your pick of it all. You can hear books of all genres narrated by Jim Dale, Stephen Fry, Will Patton, Alex Hyde White, Jeff Brick, Neil Shaw, William Demerit, and even a few by me, George Sirois. So go to www.audibletrial.com/Excelsior Journeys and start your own 30-day journey with Audible today.
So with everything you have going on with your writing, with the St. Louis Writers Guild, with all the different things you've been doing with the whole St. Louis writers community, that leads us to the decision to take what you've learned and take what other writers have learned and send it out there into the rest of the world in the form of a podcast. So I want to say like about 5 years ago, that was when Right Pack Radio was born. Now, I didn't really start until 2016, but at the same time, I've been a fan of the show more or less since the very beginning. So let's go ahead and tell my listeners, our listeners, where Right Pack Radio really comes from.
Well, Right Pack Radio came from a confluence of different ideas that just hit at the same time and just happened to hit perfectly. And since you've been a fan of it from the early days, I'm going to say I'm sorry, because we were really, in the first year or so, we were really trying to figure out, trying to find our feet and figure out how we were actually doing what we were doing. Right Pack Radio was a leap of faith. So let me start that off with that. And basically, I just shot an arrow into the dark, hoping that something would hit. It started off first as the Right Pack, and this is before it became a podcast. And the Right Pack were and still are, we're still together. We're a group of writers that get together once a week to do a write-in. And at that table, we'll bounce ideas off each other when we're stuck. That was basically the main reason. We will sit there and support each other, and sometimes we'll get into nerdy talk. Other times, and I'll explain that in a second, other times, and there's still, I had this picture somewhere. I was working on a murder mystery, and we were at a coffee house one time, but sadly this coffee house is closed. And they had a wall that people could use as a chalkboard. And I remember I wrote out an entire murder board with everybody's help as we were doing this mystery, as I was doing this mystery. And in walks the barista with my coffee order, and you just see her mouth drop. Like, what did I just walk into? Anyway, that's a sidebar. So we started off as a writing group. Now, almost all, not completely all, but almost all of the Right Pack, who appeared on Right Pack Radio, by the way, are members of various writing organizations around the St. Louis area, professional writing organizations, St. Louis Writers Guild, the local chapter of the Sisters in Crime, what's that children's writing group? The Society for Writers and Children.
Oh, the SQUIBI. It's Society of Children's Books, Writers and Illustrators.
Thank you.
And for some reason, they call it SQUIBI, even though that's not the correct, placement of the initials. But still, it makes for a cute word. So
exactly.
Right. Yeah.
So we've got all that, and we would get together, and I somehow, for some reason, I sat back, and I was listening, just kind of like a metaphysical situation, and I'm listening to the conversations, and I got thinking, we've got all this knowledge of a writing industry, and some of us are newbies, some of us are well published, and at the same time as I'm having this kind of revelation, was watching a day or two earlier, or whatever, how the time frame was. There's a TV show in St. Louis called Donnybrook, and it's on our public broadcasting system. It is nothing more than a group of reporters from different news agencies that sit down, have a very boisterous roundtable conversation about what's going on in the news at that time. So I was watching that before the particular time at Right Pack Radio, and then I had also started listening to a podcast called Star Talk, which was with Neil deGrasse Tyson. If you don't know who he is, which I'm totally shocked if you don't, but hey, he is the man he's a science educator. He's an astrophysicist, and he's probably, to the general public, best known for redoing Cosmos, as well as breaking every child's heart by reducing Pluto to a dwarf planet, rather than keeping it as a planet. Sorry, Neil, I don't mean to throw you under the bus. I'm just throwing out there what you're known for.
Although if he's listening, Neil, you're more than welcome to respond to this under the bus throwing. And I'm going to tag you in this, Neil, just so you know.
Yeah, there you go. Anyway, so listening to those two things and then listening to the Right Pack talk, I'm sitting back to myself going, we've got all this information. Why are we not sharing it? Because the writing industry has changed so much from the 20th century into the 21st century. And Right Pack Radio ended up covering a lot of that change. As we were on the air initially, the industry was changing. It was an amazing event to see how that went. And we were like, after I talked everybody into it, we decided to go ahead and start airing it. We started recording in a bookstore, which unfortunately is gone now. And that was STL Books. Thank you, Robin Tice, for letting us be in there. And then eventually we moved from the bookstore into my home, where I set up kind of a makeshift recording studio that everybody could sit around and project the conversation. And we covered everything about the writing industry, from how to be published, from self-publishing to being traditionally published, how to pitch to agents, and how to pitch to the public your stories, to how to avoid the traps that are out there. And it's everything that you could ask for, but you would probably find in any of the writing magazines out there, any professional writing magazines out there, like Writer's Digest, The Writer, Poets and Writers, Publishers, whatever it is, Weekly.
Publishers Weekly, yeah.
Yeah. We were covering the same stuff. Maybe not exactly the same month and time, but we were covering the same stuff. So yeah, that's how Right Pack got started.
And there was some really, there was consistently good work, I want to say, like throughout the 5 years. Everyone was dialed into the subjects that were being touched upon, and everyone was giving their best interpretation of that particular subject, even though they weren't the strongest in that particular subject.
Right.
They were able to make it work, and it felt like a really good, fun conversation. And when I joined in 2016, that feeling was definitely heightened, because more often than not, there were only a few times when I had to basically check in with the show via Zoom. But more often than not, I was sitting there, like in your home, and you and Melanie were very welcoming, and made great hosts to have us all there. And it became like this really great thing that I was always looking forward to every week to participating in. Were there any specific episodes that really kind of stuck out to you as just like, that's a home run? Like, that's exactly what, Right Pack Radio is all about.
Yeah, there were quite a few. And I'm going to throw out a couple of them, and not so much because they were super home runs, but because of what we ended up covering. Bob, there was a couple episodes with Bob Baker on there. He is a guru of self-marketing. He is very much behind, as far as I'm concerned, he is the proverbial father of the independent the independent artist, empowered artist movement. And he's a writer, he's a musician, he's a comedian, he's a painter as well. And he's always out there. He's pushing the artists in the local area to reach out to the community. And it's not just the community. He's been pretty much hit up around the country, around the United States for his expertise. And he's always like, you got to get out there, you got to promote yourself and so forth. And this was an entire episode, and we've had it a couple of different times, about empowering the artist as well as promoting your work. And a lot of writers we're all introverts. I mean, for the most part. There might be a few exceptions to that rule, but we're all introverts, and we tend to be the people that are sitting in the background watching and listening rather than pushing ourselves forward. And he's very much about pushing us forward. Then we also had a conversation with Angie Fox, love her to death. And it was an interesting conversation. It was supposed to be about paranormal romance, and it evolved into a discussion on the industry and a revolution, or rather an evolution of a writing industry. Let me take us back a little bit to explain what I'm going to talk about. Let me take you back to 1980s. Pre-internet, or at least pre-internet being spread across like it is now. If you were wanting to be published and you wanted to promote your career, the only real path was traditional publishing, which means, for those who have no knowledge of a writing industry, this means you pitched your work to an agent or perhaps a small publisher directly. The big publishers did not take them. You pitched it to an agent. The agent would turn around, try to get their agency to buy into your book, assuming they liked your pitch, by the way. Then the agency would select whose works they were going to then turn around and pitch to the big houses, who would then turn around and actually publish your book. Now, that's really simplifying it. And this is why a book would sometimes take 2 to 3 years to get onto the bookshelf. Then you've got the invention of the internet. Self-publishing or indie publishing starts to take off, but not at first. Even though with the indie publishing, it was still seen as a pariah. If you were an indie published author back in all the way up to the, I'm just throwing a dart into a calendar to pick a date. It's probably plus or minus 3 years in this, but I'm going to call it 2010 just to make this. Actually, I'm going to say 2008. I take it back, and I've got a reason for that. So about that time, you could become a indie published author. You're publishing yourself. And you can actually start to make a living and start to have a real career. But there was still some pariah aspect to that, even at later date. Well, in 2008, we had a recession. And not only in the United States, but around the world. And out of that, in the United States itself, we went from the big 8 publishers, which, by the way, previous recessions had dwindled those down to that 8, to where we're now down to the top 5 publishers. Which allowed that, and this is the time, ballpark, when Penguin and Random House were merging.
Right.
Dorchester, that's not the correct pronunciation. Another house.
Dorchester?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Which Angie Fox had been a part of, had gone out of business and left all their authors hanging. This was a very anxious time in the writing industry. And even pre this, Amazon, which is known now as a big supporter of the indie published, that, like them or hate them, they've been the gateway for all these indie publishers to get out there. Before this, they were saying even then, hey, if you're indie published, you're kind of giving yourself a kiss of death.
Right.
Okay. So at this time period, as I'm kind of breaking this in, you had two choices of paths that you could choose to follow. You could either go traditional or you go indie, but never the tween will meet.
Mm-hmm.
You were one or the other. Well, Angie Fox, I'm not sure she was the first one or not. She definitely was in the early wave. She became a hybrid because her original series, which I love to death, the Accidental Demon Slayer series, she had to get those rights back to have her book, and she went through hell to get it back from Dorchester. But she ended up becoming a hybrid author where she was self-publishing and she was still traditionally publishing, and what she was able to create with herself and through her work, this audience she had, she's able to demand, maybe demand's the wrong word, but she's able to demand more on the traditional publishing range than she would otherwise normally have been able to. And she's got this choice now of going, do I want this to be in someone else's control, or do I want this in my control? I can seem to be able to sell. Can I sell this more this way or that way, and so forth? And yes, I know, I'm sorry, I'm probably breaking everybody's heart about the writing industry being all about art, right, about the art and not about business. I'm sorry. There's a huge business aspect to it. Mm-hmm. And if you're a starving writer, there's a reason. You got to get the business part down, as much as you might hate me for saying that. So she brought that entire conversation going all the way back to what I was talking about at the initial, is we evolved that episode from paranormal romance to talking about this entire new aspect of publishing, which was traditional versus indie versus hybrid.
Yeah.
And then another one we had is Melanie, who's my wife, and I met a couple. This was at BoucherCon in Long Beach, California. BoucherCon, for those who don't know where it is a convention that moves around the country. And I also want to say it goes around the world, at least it's gone to Canada, and I think it's gone to England, but don't hold me to that last part. I definitely know Canada because I wanted to go and I missed it. It is a convention for fans of mystery and thrillers, as well as a writers' conference in many ways for that same genre. And I met the Legates, who were creating at the time. They had already launched their company, but they were creating what's called One More Story. And One More Story is, if you grew up with Choose Your Own Adventures, basically it's a virtual storytelling that's not dissimilar from that. And we had this couple come on to our show a couple of times, actually, and we interviewed them about what One More Story was. Now, why is this important to the writing industry? They were looking for writers to tell the stories, to write these stories. So it became another avenue beyond your traditional concept of, let me just write a short story, let me write a poem, let me write a novel. Here came another avenue that writers could plug into.
Right.
And One More Story took off. Oh my God, it took off, especially when they signed on. And I knew they had signed this on when we were interviewing them. We just could not let the cat out of the bag. So we kept dancing around it. But they signed on Charlene Harris. Now, for those who don't know who Charlene Harris is by name, I'm sure everybody out there has heard of a TV show, True Blood. And she's the one who wrote the novels that became the TV show True Blood. So they ended up taking off, and it took off. We watched them from being a small company who was struggling to now they have been invited and have spoken on TED Talks. They have been invited as main speakers or big-time speakers to Comic-Con in San Diego. They have been invited to talk at gaming conventions in Mumbai. Yeah, Mumbai, I almost called it Mumbai. That's incorrect. Mumbai and others. They're seen as now leaders in the gaming industry because of what they created. And there's a new platform for authors to be able to sell work into, as well as readers to go in there and to actually play the books they wanted to read. Kind of a weird way of saying that. And Right Pack Radio ended up covering the blossoming of this new part of the industry.
Mm-hmm.
So that's some of the ones why I really, you asked me what ones stick out. Those are some of the ones because it's what we ended up covering.
Yeah.
By complete accident. And just watching the industry evolve over 5 years is amazing.
And those were a real crucial 5 years too, because we got, like you said, we got to see firsthand, really, like we got to see how self-publishing became, evolved from this pariah that it was all the way through a natural part of the industry to the point where, where self-publishing books are being looked at the New York for the New York Times bestseller list.
Yeah.
And it's really amazing to see that growth, because I remember back in 2001, I picked up the book that was called The Complete Idiot's Guide to Publishing Science Fiction. And that throughout the book, there's basically like maybe 2 paragraphs that are dedicated to self-publishing. And they're saying, basically, don't do it. You will wreck your career. This is the last stop for anyone who would ever consider themselves to be taken seriously. At that point, any sort of like self-publishing packages were confined to ex libris, who would call you at 3:00 in the morning and try to sell you their $2,000 package. And, and those packages always looked horrendous. They looked like they were self-published. Yeah. And it was just a real drag, to look at that. I felt so, I remember feeling just like my skin was like crawling after I put myself on their mailing list and was subjected to their calls and going through their catalog. I'm just like, I want no part of this. Like, this looks terrible. And then jump ahead to 2008, where they come out with The Complete Idiot's Guide to Self-Publishing. So it was already kind of making that jump. It was already kind of, in the process of making that jump into something that looked viable. And the real key factor, I know a lot of people like to pick on Amazon for a lot of the different things that they do or don't do, but it was Amazon that brought the Kindle to everyone. And that became the main venue for all this self-published work. Now, the problem now is that, the self-publishing market is, it's pretty saturated to the point where you really have to be, like a hell of a curator to kind of pick and choose what will go on your Kindle, because there's so many people that are out there that use National Novel Writing Month to write their one draft of a novel and then publish right away because it's so easy.
Yes.
And those are topics that are discussed in Right Pack Radio, which I really love. And I love the fact that we have brought back Right Pack Radio in this great format, which we will discuss later. Mm-hmm. But I remember the Bob Baker marketing episode was fantastic. I highly recommend everyone check that out. I highly recommend any episode in Right Pack Radio that has to do with social media, because you learn so much from basically like hearing all the different mistakes that were made, all the different pitfalls that were made. And it's so wonderfully educational and entertaining as hell to really dive into that. And a big one that I really want to throw out there is one that I believe our fellow author Lee Savage played a pivotal role in getting up there, and that was authors behaving badly. We had, I hadn't joined the show yet, but right. You had M.R. Sellers call in, and he told these amazing horror stories, really, of all different readers that were behaving in a way that you really should not. And also putting the spotlight on different authors that are going about conventions and conferences and agent pitching and everything the wrong way, the absolute wrong way. Anything that has to do with conventions and conferences and retreats, like those episodes are a blast. I strongly recommend. I sound like a fan really. But at the same time, that's how I started. I started, like listening to you guys, and was thrilled when I was given the opportunity to join in. And I noticed that, like after I joined in, that's when my listening of the show kind of, took a wane, because I myself am not the biggest fan of my own voice. So
Is that
I've
normal
already
for voice actors?
it really is. It really is. And that must mean that I'm doing something right, if that's the case. So.
Yeah.
So with that in mind, you go through these 5 years of Right Pack Radio. They eventually run their course, but at the same time, what you decide to do with these shows is fantastic, because the last thing that anyone I definitely can speak for myself. Last thing I wanted to see was for all this great material to just go away. So. When we were talking originally back in 2018 at the St. Louis Writers Guild Conference, Gateway Con, I was talking about wanting to create my own podcast, to kind of spin off from Right Pack Radio and commit to doing a show that I can do from the privacy of my own home, and be able to put the spotlight on different creative people that have not yet been given the credit that they deserve. And while I was discussing this with you, the one thing I didn't really have was a name for the show, and that's when you came up with it. We just happened to be sitting in the dealer's room, and you looked over at my my wonderful banner that my publisher, Aloris Publishing, supplied for me. And you saw that at the bottom of Excelsior, it says Book 1 in the Excelsior Journey. So you said, how about the Excelsior Journey? Now, I was able to take that and make it Excelsior Journeys, so that way it's more plural, and, it's really kind of like an infinite number there. But this was originally going to be the Right Pack Radio Podcasting Network, with Right Pack Radio being the flagship show on, airing every Sunday. And then Excelsior Journeys would, go on every Tuesday, and we would fill other spots in our schedule with other shows, and getting other people possibly from Right Pack Radio to get involved. Now, we're still in progress with that, but at the same time, as life tends to do, life tends to give us some new challenges. And so all of a sudden, we've taken the other name that you had adopted, called Winding Trails Media. Now, where did Winding Trails Media itself, that name, come from?
Well, let me back up a little bit more than that. Right Pack Radio came out before Winding Trails Media. We started off first with Right Pack Radio, and as I want to say at least 3 years into it, maybe 4 years into it, 3 years. I always had a love for radio dramas. Actually, my first love of radio dramas was accidentally catching episodes on campouts of Star Wars, the radio drama. Yes, for those of you who are Star Wars fans and did not know it existed, there are radio dramas for Star Wars, Empire Strikes Back, and Return of the Jedi.
And they're damn good, too.
Oh, yeah. They were written with Brian Daley in conjunction with LucasArts. And the sound effect guy, Ben Burt from LucasArts, is all over the episodes as well. And some of the stars, not all of them, but some of the stars are also in those in those shows. Star Wars itself, I want to say, was like 11 hours of audio play.
About, yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so that got me interested in radio dramas. I was like, I want to create a network, not only of Right Pack Radio, but also I was going to do Winding Trails Media, or Winding Trail Theater, and which didn't take off the first time around. I ran into a lot of pitfalls, and actually where those pitfalls were not where I expected them to be at, so I closed it down for now. Keyword, for now. But as I was coming up with the concept, the term Winding Trails came out as I was trying to think of a company name. And my wife and I were driving, and we were driving on a road that's here in St. Louis County that is kind of windy, and it's one I like to drive anyway. And somehow the concept of that winding road ended up transforming into Winding Trails. And after a Google search there, I was able to find that nobody really had taken the name Winding Trails as a company name, so Winding Trails Media There were a couple out there of Winding Trails, like Winding Trails Realtors or stuff like that. But Winding Trails Media did not exist, so I stole it and created it. And then the concept of it back then was to create an entire network, not only of podcasts, but to go beyond podcasts. And we'll see where this goes eventually. I don't want to let all the cats out of the bag, but the goal was to create a podcast network as part of it, as a main part of it, which would have Right Pack Radio. It would have some other shows, like eventually we've got talking where we would have Excelsior Journeys.
Yep.
And we would have a radio play on a weekly or at least a monthly basis come on. Well, for reasons which I'm not going to go into, we closed Right Pack Radio. It finally ran its course. As all good things must come to an end.
Mm-hmm.
And you and I were talking, and we just decided, let's do this Winding Trails Media Podcast Network.
Right.
And we've taken off since then. That was a decision made, January, and this is now April of the same year, 2019.
Yeah, we're getting close.
Yeah, and we've got your show. We've got one, actually, you helped me name, called Exploration Beyond, which is about exploring your universe, your world, and yourself, searching out your boundaries and finding ways to explode past them. Then we have another gentleman you've told me that's coming on board as well. I'll let you talk about him in a moment. Mm-hmm. We have right now tentatively LaShonda Hoffman, who is a fabulous motivational person as far as when trying to promote your work and trying to promote yourself out there. She is behind the social butterfly movement, as I call it, and that's actually her phrase, the social butterflies, getting your stuff out there. We're going to have her show syndicated as well, and I might try to talk to her into moving her live show over to us as well. That's still in discussion. Nothing firmed up yet on that, but we know she's on board. It's just now we've got to do all the firming up. And we've got also Lee Savage, who was on Right Back Radio. She's an erotic romance writer. She'll be joining, but we're going to create a whole nother channel that is, I think you've termed it best, is Right Pack Radio Podcasting Network is all about discovering your passion.
You mean Winding Trails Media?
Right. Winding Trails, what did I call it? Right Pack Radio, didn't I?
Yeah. Yeah.
Phew, sorry, habit. Winding Trails Media Podcast Network is going to be all about finding your passion, and Winding Trails Entertainment is going to be about exploring your passion.
What is your passion?
What is your passion?
It's like kind of, enjoying in it, just indulging yourself in it. That's, so what is, if people have, like any sort of passion about film, about television, about books or whatever, they get to discuss that on Winding Trails Entertainment. They get to do reviews. They get to do commentaries. They get to do, breakdowns of different things. They get to, it's going to be a blast. I'm really looking forward to kind of putting the word out there about Winding Trails Entertainment, because that was really kind of birthed last week at this time. So it was really just kind of feeling like I've even gotten like a question from someone saying that, would you want to, do a sports show? And the way I originally, it didn't really fit in the Winding Trails Media, but for Winding Trails Entertainment, hey, if it's your passion, why not? Exactly. Why not go for it? Let's see what happens there. So yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited to see where Winding Trails Entertainment will go, because the sky is really the limit with that. Everyone has some great options for Winding Trails Media to listen to all these great people that talk about, that are all about, helping you find your passion. What is it that's going to drive you? Right. And like you said, we also have, a colleague from my 411mania.com days, Tony Farinella. He's decided he wanted to get into podcasting after hearing my show. So I'm thrilled with the fact that he wants to be involved with this network. And he's got a great fit too, because he can go right into what he calls his Tough Love podcast. Basically, like, he is going to talk with all, different people that have overcome different things in their lives, that have been able to kind of not use anything that was afflicting them, anything that was holding them back, as any sort of excuse, and pushing through it and achieving what they wanted. So it's a kind of like a next level version of Excelsior Journeys. So I'm really looking forward to seeing kind of like this double shot of Excelsior Journeys and Tony's Tough Love, whatever he wants to call it. I'm not even sure what the final title will be, but that's actually not too bad of a title on its own. So we'll see where the future brings. But I'm super excited about this. So what were your thoughts and everything, like, about where Winding Trails Media can go? Like, like, you already know how excited I am, but like, I'm curious to see, like, how pumped are you for all of this, and what do you see happening in the near future for Winding Trails?
It's going to be an interesting discovery of where we go.
Yeah.
I'm going to borrow from J.J. Abrams. I saw a TED Talk with him, and he's talking about, as he writes, he thinks of what he's writing as a mystery box. Now, I need to explain something. He bought, when he was a kid, when he was with his grandfather, I think is how the story goes. Sorry, JJ, if I can goof up your story. But anyway, he bought at a magic house a magic store. He bought this thing called a magic box. It was supposedly a certain amount of magic for less cost or whatever it was. He never opened the box. It always sits in his office. And he looks at that box and thinks about that as, whenever he's writing a story, it's like, I'm actually don't know where the story's going to go, but I'm going to mentally open this box, and I'm going to explore and see where it goes. And that's really what Winding Trails Media is going to be. Where I'd like to see it go ultimately is a series of podcasts, both channels, where we have podcasts every day, new topics, different people, and possibly, okay, here's my pie in the sky. I'm shooting an arrow at Saturn on this one. A couple hours of podcast each day, not just one show a day.
Yeah.
2, maybe 3 a day, or even more. And we're also being able to have works published under Winding Trails Media as a publisher. Also music. So I talked about the Winding Trails Theater, which I gave a hint. We're going to be bringing that back, thanks to George's help as well. We're going to eventually get we're overcoming what we learned from the pitfalls. And let me stop myself for a second. I am very much a believer and acceptor of failure. And the reason why is I learn more from every time I fall flat on my face than I do from every one of my successes. And to borrow from a Japanese phrase, fall 7 times, stand up 8, or fall 6 times, stand up 7, whatever that number is. That's how you continue on to success. You're going to fail. You're going to fall. And then you're going to have to find a way to push yourself back up and keep going. And that's the situation of Winding Trails Theater. I failed. I admit I failed. But did I learn some important lessons that now I can take and move on and create the Winding Trails Theater of eventually of becoming. So having audio podcasts, and then as before, having audio shows, the music that would go into those, we're eventually hoping to have people compose, would be something else Winding Trails Media would be able to sell and support the artists who are creating the music. So it's kind of like people buy television show soundtracks. People buy movie soundtracks. I'm guilty. I do
Me too. Me too. I'm happily guilty.
And so same concept. So you enjoyed this podcast. You enjoyed a series of radio plays. Here's the music to it that you can get and enjoy it in the background. So yeah, that's the ultimate avenue that it's going. And all of this. I don't care. I know it's a business. So, of course, like any business, we want to make a profit. That's out there. Okay, I admit to it. But the real goal is to help other people achieve.
Yeah.
Anytime in which I'm told, like yourself, you've told me yourself that Right Pack Radio helped move you in your writing career to where you went from indie published to being able to be represented by Alor's Publishing, and you had an agent, if I remember right.
And I got an agent afterwards. I got it actually last September. So yeah,
there we go.
Like all of that happened. None of that happens without Right Back Radio, because you guys were the ones that gave me the confidence to push forward on it.
Every time I hear one story about that, that's the real profit.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, I couldn't agree more, man. And I am so excited for the possibilities of what lies ahead with us, with Winding Trails Media, with Winding Trails Entertainment. It's exciting. And just so anyone, just in case anyone is looking to get into the podcasting game, but is not sure exactly how to do it, we can help you with that. Because the main thing is that we have open slots for shows. So if you have a show that's been kind of like burning a hole in your soul and wanting to get out there, whether it's something that fits in the Winding Trails Media mold or whether it fits in the Winding Trails Entertainment mold, whichever one it is, let us know. We would love to hear about it. And I've given my email address out here many times. I'll give it again. Let me know. I'm at George H. Sirois, Sirois, @gmail.com. And the great thing about us, and I can, definitely say this is a big thing, is that we have basically subscribed to the same mold that Image Comics did when they were bringing in creators, because the only things that we would basically, technically own is the name Winding Trails Media. And that's pretty much it. So all we require from you is just, either, like about $4 to keep the Podbean show going every month, for $2 to keep the website going every month.
Right.
And you do that, and any other subscription, any other, say, sponsorships you get from other people to get put on your show, that's your money. We don't want it. It's money that you earned to get that out there. So by all means, go ahead and do that. Scorch the earth with your show. And because what you're going to do is it's going to get everyone noticed. So you are basically you're doing your part to not only help yourself succeed, but also help all of us at Winding Trails Media succeed. Because if you succeed, we all succeed. And I am really psyched to hopefully hear from some of you, and I'm looking forward to this whole venture. So put this on your calendar, folks, because at 7 o'clock on Central Time on Saturday, May 4th. May the 4th be with you. We are, yes, Star Wars Day. It just seems right with us nerds. Exactly. We are having a pre-launch party online, and there's going to be more information about that on the Winding Trails Media Facebook page, as well as windingtrailsmedia.com. And on Sunday, May 5th, that is when Winding Trails Media Network is officially on the air, and it will be documented with the first episode of Right Pack Radio that is going.
Right.
Yep, that we're going to be going right out of the gate, and then whatever show happens on Monday will happen on Monday, and then Tuesday is another episode of Excelsior Journeys, and so on and so forth. So we got plenty of spots. Like I said before, we're so looking forward to hearing from you guys. Before we wrap things up, David, let our listeners know where they can find you.
Most certainly. And before I actually do that, I'm going to change a phrase you used. I love the idea of scorching the earth, but you know what we're really doing? We're sowing the earth.
There you go.
We're putting out, we are, and this is anybody who's joining Winding Trails down the line, you bring your podcast to us, we'll help you get it going. But the idea is you're sowing the earth for other people to grow and to break beyond their boundaries. You want them to explode beyond those boundaries. So with that, you can find me on my website right now, which needs to be redone, but it's www.davidallan.lucas.com. You can find Winding Trails Media. The website is right now in transition. So at the time of this airing, you won't find it yet probably, but soon thereat, hopefully by May 4th, I'm working to get that done, is windingtrailsmedia.com. You can also find me all over, and Winding Trails Media, all over Facebook, Twitter. You can find me particularly LinkedIn and Instagram. So we're out there.
Yep. Yes. And we are so looking forward to the, yes.
Before I forget, you talked about GatewayCon, and we didn't talk about Brad Cook, but I'm sorry, Brad. But anyway,
just as a special nod, like one of the main guys that was really instrumental in Right Pack Radio and also with the St. Louis Writers Guild.
Yes, very much so.
As a previous president, and also I believe he's currently the historian, right?
Correct.
So Brad R. Cook is a hell of a man for one thing, and he's also a hell of an author because he's got he has a steampunk trilogy called The Iron Horseman, and he has the three books are The Iron Horseman, The Iron Zulu, and The Iron Lotus. Correct. And he's really made a name for himself in the steampunk community, especially here in St. Louis. And he's been really instrumental in getting a lot of people prepared for getting themselves ready to pitch to agents. He's very important when it comes to doing that, because what he's doing is he's doing something that not many conventions really do. A lot of conventions tend to kind of throw people right out into the deep end and see if they sink or swim. He's giving you the floaters to actually be able to stay afloat and know what you're doing, and also to avoid what not to do when you're pitching agents. So kudos to you, Brad. And I hope that in time, if your schedule allows, you join with us on this little venture, because we definitely benefit from having you here.
And the reason I bring him up, and reason I bring up GatewayCon, we are going to have one more episode of Right Pack Radio, which we're going to do Right Pack Radio live at GatewayCon. GatewayCon in St. Louis is a writers' conference, a writers' retreat, and a book fair. So more to come. Check out stlwritersguild.org for more information. You'll find it out there. And hopefully, if you're a writer, you'll come, because, as you just said, Brad puts on this great workshop about pitching, and not to toot any horns or anything, but I'm going to toot them. The very first GatewayCon, we had agents come out to us and tell us, I can't use their names, I'm not allowed to, but off the record, they told us that they had accepted more manuscripts at their pitch sessions at GatewayCon than they had at any other conference, because of that workshop.
That's fantastic.
The authors knew what they were doing.
There you go. I mean, it really doesn't get any better than that. So, we're all about preparing people in any way that we can, whether it's in person over at a convention or a writing workshop or on the air with Winding Trails Media. We want to help you all succeed, and we are so looking forward to the next step in making all of this happen. So thank you all for listening. Thank you all for being a part of Excelsior Journeys as a whole. And if you really enjoyed this, please go ahead and give us a subscribe. Please give us a comment. Please give us a like. Share the episode. Whatever you need to do to get us out there, because we really appreciate your ability in getting us to a wider audience. So.
Oh, and I forgot to mention, George, before you go away, we are going to set up a Patreon. No, we're actually not setting up Patreon, but we're setting up a subscription service, which Winding Trails Media will have special things for those who subscribe. And if you do have a podcast on either Winding Trails Media or Winding Trails Entertainment, all the money from I'm calling it a Patreon, all the subscriptions gets equally distributed.
Huge thanks to everybody for listening. Thank you all for being a part of Excelsior Journeys. And for my partner and friend, David Allen Lucas, this is George Sirois saying to all of you, ever upward. We'll see you next week.